recording this call. So we do ask folks to stay on mute just to help us avoid any background noise, since we do post these on YouTube for you all to view later and use as any resource that you may need in the future. So feel free to use the chat, introduce yourself, let us know where you're zooming in from, and also any questions that pop up throughout the night. We'll keep an eye on the chat and make sure that we really get to those questions. And for those who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're super excited to have you in space with us. And we want to make sure that you sign up to become an official member with IJ using our tiny URL that we'll drop in the chat. With this, you'll be able to receive monthly updates, official announcements, quarterly newsletters, and all things IJ. So definitely sign up for that because it'll help just stay in touch with the org. And with that, for folks that are just joining, just a reminder to stay on mute, unless invited to come off mute, which we will have some opportunities throughout tonight, but feel free to use the chat. And then before we get started this evening, I just wanted to let you all know kind of what we're going to be engaging in. We're going to start with our usual grounding exercise just to, center ourselves, be in space with each other. Then we're going to hear just a few brief organizational updates, and then the bulk of tonight's meetings really just doing some voter education, talking about all things voting, talking about resources to register to vote, ways to vote, where to vote, and all of that. So we'll be here to answer any questions that you all have about that. And then just to get us started, as I said, we're going to do a brief grounding exercise. So I'm going to share my screen. While we do this, folks can feel free to stay on or off camera, whatever's comfortable for you. It's just going to be 5 minutes, just a good time to, get in space, get comfortable, and ready for tonight's meeting. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Sorry, sometimes I get slow at this.
Thank you for joining me for today's practice. Let's take a comfortable seat, perhaps with a cushion or block to elevate your hips. Allow yourself these first few moments to settle in, making any necessary adjustments. Once you're ready, gently close down your eyes. Start to notice your breathing, gently deepening and slowing down your breath. Take a deep inhale through the nose and out through your mouth. Once more, just like that. Deep inhale through the nose and out through your mouth. Allow your face to soften, releasing the jaw, the shoulders, and allow the crown of the head to lift up towards the sky as you ground down through your seat. Sensing the length along the entire spinal column. Begin to notice the breathing coming in and out of the nose. Perhaps sensing the coolness of the breath as you inhale and the slight warmth of the breath as you exhale. Allow the breath to be as it needs to be. Some breaths might be long, some might be short. One breath gently cascading into the next. Imagine your mind to be as spacious as a vast, open, clear sky. And any thoughts, sensations, or feelings that arise are like clouds that simply pass through. Observe and recognize them, but no need to engage or respond. Creating the space for whatever needs to be present to be here. Notice the space that you've created and continue to lightly follow your breathing. Place your left hand over the center of your chest and then your right hand on top of the left. You may feel the grounding sensation of the hands on your chest and allow the breath to softly deepen into that space. With each exhale, softening and letting go. Three more breaths, just like that. Inhaling into your hands, and as you exhale, letting go. Allow your hands to release down by your side onto your thighs. And when you're ready, gently blink open the eyes.
Always great to start off with a grounding exercise. Let us know in the chat how that felt. I know for myself, it's a good reminder to stop and take a break and take a breather and take some breaths and just feel grounded. So really do always appreciate starting our monthly meetings with this grounding exercise. But I don't know about y'all, but I'm feeling a little bit more relaxed. It's been a long week already, and we're barely halfway done. We're only halfway done. So I'll pass it back over to Brianna.
Thank you, Ephraim. It took me a second because the YouTube was still playing in the background. But yes, definitely nice to always start with that and just kind of center ourselves. And like I said, so after the grounding, we had a few organizational updates that we wanted to share with you all. Just before we get started into tonight's meeting. They'll be very brief, but I'll also pass it back to you, Ephraim, for you to just share these.
Okay, great. So as you all know, we have our community action committee that's scheduled, I believe, on the third Wednesday of each month. And so just wanted to update everyone that us as an organization have decided to put a pause on the committee meetings for the rest of the year. And this is only to revitalize this space to improve thinking of strategizing of ways to improve membership engagement outcomes, and make sure that we are being holding ourselves accountable, being the best we can be with you all. Another major reason is, as you all know, it's an election year. We really want to tap into the voting educational piece, mobilizing our community members and things of that. That's why we are having this space today here for we chose to have to talk about voter education today at today's meeting. Um, so just know that that'll be paused for now. We will keep you all updated. It doesn't mean we don't have calls to action or any type of community action will be not needed, but definitely if you have not signed up to be on a member already, the link that I dropped earlier in the chat, please do so you receive any email notifications. We definitely have a lot to push for as far as some of the propositions going up this year. As y'all know, there's Prop 36, and we'll dive into it later, but we're definitely want to do work on the no on Prop 36 campaign, and also the yes on Proposition 6, which you all know is is formerly known as ACA 8, the amendment to the Constitution, which was pushed by amazing organizations through the legislature and is now going to be on the November ballot. So that's a quick update on the committees. Also, everyone's been asking for it, so we have begun the conversation and actually the planning phases of an in-person event looking to be held. We're aiming for October. It's going to be held in Central Valley area. So for those Northern and Central Valley community members, definitely we hear you. We want you to know that we're working on it. We're going to have that. And we're looking, this event, we're looking to build a space to celebrate people that have came home recently, and recently can be up to 5 years. Like, we're not gonna, since IJ's existence, really, it's just welcoming people home, creating a space to have that. And then we're also gonna have provide other resources, have other people there, a space where they can connect with one another, and then we can talk about civic engagement, and then also like the importance of us mobilizing together and being in community. So stay tuned definitely for more information that is in the works. And that's the only updates that we have for you all today.
Thank you so much, Ephraim. If any of you all have questions about any of those, feel free to drop them in the chat or reach out to Ephraim and I via email. We're always here to answer anything or just be there for whatever you may need. And then just to kind of hop in, we have like a good amount of things to discuss tonight. Ephraim, I thought we could maybe start with a poll to kind of like get a lay of the land, and then we can do the intro first. So I went ahead and switched the slide really quick. But we are going to take a poll. There's a few survey questions that will pop up on your Zoom just to kind of get like a baseline of everyone's stance with like voting, like whether you're registered, just all of that to kind of help us with these results. We'll take them and bring them into our next meeting, kind of apply, if someone needs more resources in finding where to register to vote or ways to vote, then we'll really like hone in on that. So kind of just depending on these results, we're going to use these to help support you all and also use them internally to support our efforts as well. So I'll go ahead, and then Ephraim, you can share your screen if you want to start the slides just so they can see them as well, but they'll also pop up on your screen, and then feel free to answer as they come up. And then you can go to the next with that. And let me know if you all are seeing, did questions pop up on your screen? Yeah.
Yes, and the poll popped up as well. So we're
awesome. So we're going to put these questions on the screen. These are what we're asking. And then also like on Zoom, you can answer accordingly.
Oh, and this coming through a QR code? I saw that.
Is it?
Yes, it's not letting me answer directly. I don't know if it's working for everyone else. Just a heads up.
I'm getting responses. I'm not sure if folks pulled it up by a QR code.
Okay.
It might be because you're the co-host.
Oh, okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Stanley. Probably give it about 30 to a minute. We have a decent amount of responses left. I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to answer. Okay. I'm going to end the poll. If you didn't have the opportunity to answer it either, feel free to chat me and I'll launch it again. No. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to answer that as well. That will also just like help us make sure that we support you in the best way. Like when it comes to this year's election, make sure you have all the resources, all the tools that you need. So this will really help us out. And I appreciate you all for taking some time to fill that out. And then with that, we can get started with the presentation. Efrain, if you want to hop on to introduce the topic, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so we're gonna start with we're gonna begin here. And we wanted to read this quote to you all. It says voters make or break governments. Use your voice to vote and take action towards criminal justice reform here in California. And oh, so let me leave that there. And just really talking about, I mean, this to, thank you, Brianna, for bringing this quote and then also like putting this picture. To me, it speaks volumes of the importance growing up myself. Was never taught to vote, never pushed to vote, never realized the power, the strength that we had in numbers. Once we become educated, and for me, I'll say that was for a reason. I believe that there's just the education, the lack of education in voting and getting civically involved, whether it be in your community, in your state, in the nation. It's something that I have found, and we know at IJ to be very powerful. We see it through legislation, the work that we do here at IJ. And it's so important really to educate our community members and empower them to use that voice, to have those voices heard, to be the voices for our loved ones, right, that are still currently inside and don't have that right to vote, that was taken away from them, right? So as I said, there are strength in numbers. I've come to learn that every vote counts now. Everything is so important that what we do. And this is why we wanted to have this conversation today. And we're looking to have some more conversations throughout the rest of the year. As I said, this is an election year. It's a pivotal time. Even I would say there's a lot of madness, there's a lot of craziness going on in this world, but even simply getting involved in your community, being that voice in your community and having the 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 voice to be able to vote for someone in your community that's going to represent your community, right? Our assembly members, our senators, and city councils, etc., things of that nature. The importance of having that, right? Because again, I remind everyone they work for us, and that was something again that myself I did not know. So we wanted to take this time here just to go over some of this stuff, to have some of these as reminders. Some of this stuff might be new, some of this stuff you might already know about, but just really wanted to bring this to our community members because again, You know, California is one of the most populated places in the world that has system impacted people, and we need to have our voices heard and really get out there and, you know, put our boots on the ground, get into those polling places and really have our voices heard. um so we're definitely, we already did the poll here, so we're going to jump into the first section, and that'll be led by Brianna and myself.
Thank you, Efrain. So I thought that it'd be important to kind of, before we dive into just this year's election, it'd be kind of nice for a moment to focus on the types of elections that happen. So what's going to be coming up in November will be the general elections. But the three types of elections that happen are primary elections, general elections, and local elections. So the primary, that's usually during March or June of even numbered. And the purpose of the primary elections is really to just determine which candidates will represent each political party in the general election. So this one just passed, that you may have voted on. So in this one, you'll be voting on the presidential primary, the statewide primaries, congressional primaries, legislative primaries, and then some propositions and measures that may go onto the ballot, and also local propositions as well. And then the general elections, so this is what's upcoming in November. These are typically held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November of even numbered years. So this purpose is to decide which candidates will fill the elected offices. So the candidates being the ones that were selected in the primary elections. So they'll be voting on federal offices like the president, state offices like the governor, legislative offices, judicial offices, and then propositions and measures. One proposition that will be on this general election, like ACA 8. And then local elections, which this is really, really important to our work, especially. It's really important to abolition work and just communities in general. You really get, I think, the most say, not I think, you do get the most say and like the buy-in in this election process, because you're really having a say of what's going on in your community by voting on these issues. And it's really important to this work, because we're also voting on issues that can affect the work that we do. So you're electing local officials and you're voting on local issues. So you're really helping to raise your voice to support your community. The dates can vary on local elections. They're often held in November in odd number years. So there will be one next year for local elections. Here you'll be voting on like city and county offices, like your mayors, city council members, school board members, special districts like directors for special districts like water, fire, sanitation, and then also local measures. So that's really important as well to our work, because you could vote on local measures that support abolition work that we do. And I'm also excited to see from the poll that everyone is a registered voter. So I do want to just ask if anyone's comfortable to come off of mute or just pop it in the chat. If you kind of find yourself voting more in like local elections or more in like general elections. So if you tend to vote more on like community measures or more like the statewide and federal measures, just curious to see. And if not, no worries, that's okay. Efrain, do you have one?
I was about to say, I was giving you a little space. You know me, I like to talk. But I wanted to give some space. But you definitely know, I mean, ever since Prop 17 passed and I had my voting rights restored, when I was on parole, I vote in everything, anything and everything that I can. And I do want to make sure that I have my voice heard, because I have seen the proof in the pudding, so to speak, as they say, right? And seen the change that we can make as a community. And so, yeah, anything I can get involved with. One of the biggest pieces I think for myself is really educating myself now, really taking the time to do that. So I think we're going to dive into some of that later, and have some resources that are available throughout our communities. But yeah, anything and everything that I can vote on, I'm there. I don't take that right, you know, because it is a right, not a privilege, right? I don't take it for granted, since it has been restored to me. And so yeah.
Thank you. I really like how you said like it's it's not a privilege, like it's a right, and you wanna use that right. And I think everyone in the chat's really like resonating with that. Like they're like Sherry, any ballot that they get, they're gonna vote. Daniel, whenever I get a reminder to vote in the election, local, general, Vita, community and statewide measures. And Jessica also uplifted that they're still learning. So just like what you stated, Ephraim, it's just really important to like learn and educate yourself in these elections. So I'm glad that you all are here to engage in this conversation. And thank you for popping in the chat. And then with that, Ephraim, I'll pass it to you to talk a little bit about the Voters' Choice Act that will play a role actually in this election coming up in November.
So you might know already, the Voters' Choice Act signed into California law in 2016 by Governor Brown. This law was basically put into place in order to expand early voting, offer different ways of voting, more opportunities for people to really get out there and vote, not just having to go into a polling place and cast your ballot in that form. So, what some of the ways that this gave us more options was the mailing. Every voter has a right to do it the mailing way now. So we could mail our ballots in. We receive them ahead of time. I believe we have some on the next. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. And then it expanded the in-person early voting, right? I think one of the obstacles we all know is like those long lines at the polling place on the day of, so now we're able to go cast our ballots in if we want earlier than that. Allowing any voters cast a ballot at any voting center within their county, which was, I think, big, because I think that, like, for my family members, I wouldn't even say for myself because I never voted before that, but I remember my family members having to find out, which place, and it was, sometimes it would change for them, and it was just like, having to navigate through all of that. It's bad enough having to, educate yourself on all the voting and the places, people running, but then after having to figure out where to vote, now with this act that passed in 2016, you can cast your ballot at any voting center. It doesn't have to be the one in your local community. And then providing those secure drop-off locations throughout the county. We've seen them through everywhere. The big boxes in there, so you can just simply drive up, drop in your mail-in ballot there. And then since 2020, all California counties have the option to participate in this. And then we could drop the link there to see their
I just did,
counties.
Ephraim.
Oh, you did already? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm all like looking at the chat. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, you're totally fine.
To see which county is participating in contact information for the offices, etc. And then something I spoke about earlier in my own personal experience. Prop 17, which was a big win for us, along with a bunch of organizations that help, and the community that help push this and push this into the elections, right? This constitutional amendment pushed it into the elections and allowed Californians to vote on this. And I do want to highlight a couple points. This restored voting rights for people that were currently on parole. And really, at that time, around that time, I believe the number was at about 50,000 people that were currently on parole around that time, and that restored voting rights for all of those. Also wanted to really highlight that this ballot initiative had one of the highest voter turnouts from all the ballot initiatives in the election that year. And won with 58% voting yes to allow people on parole the right to vote. We also will drop in the chat, and then I'm sure we're going to send with the follow-up email. One thing through this work, I would say that I have found is the lack of education in regards to this, because I still talk to some of my friends that are coming home, or people that I meet that have just came home from incarceration and don't really understand that they have that right to vote. And they'll be like, oh, well, I'm still on parole. And it's like, no, you can vote. Like, this proposition passed, you have that. Another thing with the other advocacy work that I've done on the side, aside from Initiate Justice, just really being out there, is I found that in these parole offices, probation offices, this information is not even out there. You know, they still have the old rules of what it, you know, how the eligibility for people having the right to vote. And it's sad, right? Because if we're not educated, we don't know, if no one tells us, right? And that's why it's so important. This proposition has been so important in the work that we do, and just in really giving voice to the voiceless, so to speak, right? So I think it's very important to continue to educate others, to talk to our family members, our loved ones, our community members, because in the process, when this was still a constitutional amendment, I remember talking with legislators, and they had no idea that there was a difference between parole and probation. They're like, wait a minute, I thought you guys already had the right to vote. Like, no, that's people on probation. And to me, that was like, wow, like these are people that are voting on this stuff and don't even know the facts. Like it was just it blew my mind. And reminder, like I had just been home not even 6 months. And one of the, you know, as we all know, that was a COVID year. And one of the things that I brought to the table and really was saying, it was like, okay, California says I'm okay to be what was the term they were using, the workers that they had, the essential workers. That was like, California deemed me essential worker, yet come November I couldn't cast my ballot. You know, I had no voice. So how was that even fair? But luckily we were able to pass Proposition 17, and it's just a reminder, like we continue to push this, because this narrative on Proposition 17, reminding folks that they do have the right to vote once they hit that gate, once they're free, once they take those first steps out of prison or MCRP homes or wherever they're coming out of. If they're on parole, they already have that right. All they have to do is register. And we'll get into registration. I'll pass it over to Brianna.
That was like a seamless segue. That was nice, that brain. Yes, so now just like the meat and potatoes basically of the voting this year. So really we just now want to talk about what it's like, ways that you can register to vote, ways to vote, and then just some deadlines and important dates, because this stuff can come up like super quick. So we want to just make sure that you guys are equipped with all of the information and tools that you need. So in California, you must register to vote 15 days before the election day, but that can be like overrided, I guess you could say. If you miss the deadline to register, you can do same day voting registration, which would have to be in person at your local county elections office, polling place, or vote center. We're also going to give you all resources on how to find those locations in your area as well. But when you do that too, make sure anytime that you're registering to vote, make sure that you have your driver's license, the last 4 digits of your social security number, some will ask for that, and then your date of birth. But here are a few ways that you can register to vote. So online is a great option, just super easy to do. You can use this link, and I'll also put it in the chat as well. Let me find it really quick. Oh. So you can register to vote online through here, and you can also use this link to check your voter status as well. And then the next way to register is in person. Like I said, this can also happen on the same day as well, but not at these locations. So if you want to pre-register, this has to be at least 15 days before the election day, which is November 5th. So you would have to go in person to your DMV, county elections offices, library, or US Post Office. This is with a paper application. You can pick it up at one of these locations and just make sure that you submit it at least 15 days before the election. And then the last one is just the same day voting registration. So this is just important because it can get just slippery, like knowing our voting rights and everything. So know that you can still register on the day of voting. This just has to be in person at these locations. So we'll give you the resources to find these locations as well, but know that you're still eligible to vote and register. Just one thing I wanted to uplift, but I'll also, I think Ephraim, yep, already did. Thank you. And then you can go ahead to the next slide. So now I'm going to talk about some different ways to vote. Also, I think Sherry uplifted in the chat too, like lucky to be in California, because there are like many ways that you can vote here. Some states like make it very hard. So in California, you are able to vote by mail. If you're voting by mail, you also have like numerous options to turn it in, which is nice. You're able to mail it to your local elections office. You could drop it off at a ballot drop box, local elections office, poll place, vote center. So like I said, we'll be sharing the link for you all to find these locations. You also can mail it back in like from your home, but it has to be postmarked. It has to be postmarked at least on or before the day of election, like the election day. These deadlines will also be shared with you too, but just an important thing to note. You can also do early in-person voting. So this is kind of with the Voters' Choice Act that we were just talking about. So if you want to vote early and in person, this may be helpful too if you don't really want to be around crowds and just kind of want to like be able to have it adjust to your schedule. You can vote in person at a voting center near you. This will start on October 26th, and we'll drop the link for you to be able to find this early voting location. And then lastly, you can do same day in-person voting, which is also where you can register yourself to vote if you're not registered. If you wish to vote on election day, you can visit local voting locations and you can find locations near you through these links. So the one that Ephraim just dropped is for early in-person voting, and then the next one will be for just finding in-person voting offices. And I know I may be talking fast and I apologize, but this will all be shared with you. We'll probably just share the slides as well too. So this is just information you guys can all have on hand.
I was gonna say, and please, definitely always chime in, community members. Like, let us know, like, if these slides are also a great resource for you all. We could definitely share them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
As she said, we're gonna send a recap email tomorrow or later this weekend with all the information. But we could definitely include those. I'm a visual
Absolutely.
person, so I enjoy the slides.
Same. And then just the last thing. So these are all deadlines and just important dates for you all to know for the registration, voting deadlines, and all of that. So you can go to the next slide. So October 21st, that's the last day to register to vote if you wish to vote by mail or if you want to do early in-person voting. October 7th is when the county elections office will begin mailing ballots out. So you'll be receiving your ballots sometime after October 7th. The ballot drop-off locations will be open on October 8th. So if you get your ballot as soon as October 7th and you want to drop it off on October 8th, then you can do that anytime after October 8th. And then on October 26th, this is when, if your county is participating in the Voters' Choice Act, they will be opening polling locations for you to be able to come in and do early in-person voting. And November 5th, that's the day of the election. So all mail-in ballots must be postmarked by then. They can be received by November 12th, so that's no issue. Just as long as they're postmarked by November 5th, then you're good. And then also November 5th, you can also do in-person voting. And then with that, I'll pass it to Ephraim to share a little bit of what will be on the ballot this year as it relates to criminal justice and our work as well.
Great. Thank you very much. So here are just two of the ballot initiatives that IJ is really focusing on this year. As you all know, as I mentioned earlier, ACA 8 which made it out of the legislature with a lot of push from our community members and a bunch of organizations leading the fight and getting this through. And those familiar with this constitutional amendment know that it's been about 4 years in the works. I mean, probably longer than that, but the last 4 years have been a really tough push. And so happy to see this finally put on the ballot. So we have that now. ACA 8 is going to be known as Proposition 6, which ends involuntary servitude in all California prisons, right? Again, as I mentioned, there's a constitutional amendment, which is basically ending, removing that language from our constitution, which allows basically forced labor inside our California prisons. Something that I firsthand have experienced, has happened to me, and have witnessed people get punished for choosing rehabilitative programs instead of working as a yard crew member, getting, rules violation reports written up for that, because they didn't show up for work because they didn't want to work. They wanted to be they wanted to work on their rehabilitation, work on themselves, as you all know. And something that I have actually talked about in the past is like when you go to parole board, they're not looking to see how many years you worked as yard crew or how many years that you worked in the kitchen, and they're going to be like, oh, you worked 10 years in the kitchen, great job, like here you go, you're rehabilitated, you can go home. We know that's not the case, right? We have to have a lot of insight into our own life, our life crimes, our past, and all that. And in order to do that, we have to take part in these rehabilitative programs. So that's something that our community members inside and many that have came home have constantly fought against, and have had to endure. So this is going to remove that language. It's going to make it illegal for them to force that labor upon those inside. So definitely we're going to, tune in, because we're going to be pushing this, sending out more info. And then I know she's gonna, I think, oh, she already did drop the link if you guys want to learn more. Stay connected. Definitely, this is a proposition that we have our sights on, and we're definitely going to push on. Um, come the November elections. The other one is Prop 36, right? Some of you might be familiar with it, some might not, but in 2014, Proposition 47 was approved by the voters, in which it changed some crimes, such as petty theft and others. Instead of being felonies, they were dropped down to misdemeanors, and really slowed, I wouldn't say stop, but I'll say slowed down, um, so many people going into being incarcerated in California state prisons. Prop 36 now is trying to do all the work that we've done, right? And this is a time where we as a community have to come together. We have to mobilize. We really have to fight against some of these bad bills. Like we've seen in legislation this year, there's so many bad bills trying to undo the work that we've done. Proposition 36 is now officially going to be on the ballot, and we're going to mobilize and come together to fight this and vote no on this, and make sure that they don't undo all the work that we've done. um and then I believe, if you can drop, also, I didn't see if you dropped it on there, you could also research some of the other propositions that will be on the ballot, and then we'll be dropping all that. I know Brianna is dropping a lot of additional resources. Some of these, and through my experience, I found out, again, the education, right? They always send me a book, they always send us a book of what's on the ballot and things like that. But again, is it coming from community or people like us, or people that think like us? I don't feel it does, right? So those are some resources that Brianna has dropped, and then we'll follow up with it and send it to you guys as well. But it's really doing the research, right? Getting out there and educating ourselves. I think the system was put into place in order for us not to have that education, not for it to be easily accessible. And there's a lot of amazing organizations that are like-minded, that think like IJ, that think like us as a community, and are really doing the work to get that information to us. So definitely, like, support a lot of these organizations. Check out their voter guides. I know our sister organization, IJ Action, is working on them. They did an amazing one last year, which I utilized when I'm not last year, the last election, when I was casting my ballot. So it's just definitely, there's resources out there for people in our community, and we don't have to dig far to have that information, to know the get all the facts and understand what we will be voting on, who will be voting on, which people we're putting in place, what they've done in their past. All of that is so important to know. Okay. And I think that's, you dropped all the links, yes.
Yeah, so I went ahead and dropped all the links. So there's a great resource by UCLA, ACLU. They have just like a great website for you to make like a voting plan checklist. So like register to vote, voting early, all of that. So I linked that in the chat. I'll just go ahead and, sorry, I'm sending so much in the chat, but these are really helpful resources that I want
Yeah, I know. Don't feel
you
overwhelmed.
all to have.
I want to tell everybody, don't feel overwhelmed. This is all going to come to you guys. I know myself, I like to open up the links while I'm in the Zoom meetings and stuff like that, and I'll have them open. I'll check them out later. But definitely, you guys will get this have this available to you all. So don't feel the need to open all of them now or check them all now. But you'll have those resources. We want to make sure you have those resources available, because when you have these conversations with your community members, you'll have that something to turn back to and be like, hey, let me send you this information. Again, when we come together as a community, when we're out there in the community speaking to others, educating others from the stuff that we know, we'll have that information. We can have that impact come the elections.
Definitely. And that's why I think like resources like the ones like ACLU, the ones that you uplifted as well to Ephraim, and these voter guides from Courage California and also our sister organization, IJ Action, they're just super helpful to utilize and just like stay in the know about all things voting, especially for this election. So just like really important resources to utilize. And there's going to be more to be released from organizations that do amazing work. So we'll be sure to keep an eye out for those and continue to share those with you all. Just because I find them super helpful. They also make it just like so hard for you to understand like what these proposition means, like what's on your ballot. It's like I have no idea what I'm reading half the time. So I really like these just like little fact sheets that kind of give you the information in like a digestive way. So yeah, I just definitely encourage using these. And then also just the other resources that I said I would share, which is just like registering to vote. You can check your status there, finding ballot drop-off locations, finding locations to vote in person early, finding polling locations, and also ways to track your ballot. So that's for people who want to mail in their ballot. I think this is a great resource for you to just like be able to stay on top of that and know that your ballot's received, and just like rest assured that, your vote is being counted and your voice is being heard. So these are all just important resources. And if you're not able to catch them now, we're also going to share them in the follow-up email, as Ephraim mentioned. But there's a lot of information, and we just kind of want to open it up to see if anyone has any questions or comments for us. And if it's too much and you need a second, that's totally fine too, because we'll be here to answer questions as well via email or just chat if you all want to connect with us offline.
Yeah, please let us know if there's anything that you might be aware of and stuff like that that we haven't covered, you think would be useful for our community members, things of that nature. I mean, feel free. As we said, I think I always tell people we're learning together, we're growing together, we're in this fight together. So just reminding everyone that. So anything and everything you guys want to share, think we should talk about, as we move forward, before the elections, definitely let us know.
I know one thing that was uplifted in the chat was, in the polls, there was a high response of people really needing more resources on just like what's on the ballot, like, learning about the ballots and like the propositions and everything. So that's kind of why I shared those two things twice. But those are definitely conversations that we're going to continue to have in these spaces and talk about what's on your ballot and all of that in a 501c3-esque way. So I think it'll just be super important to like use these resources, but also to continue to show up in this meeting spaces and learn more about things such as this slide, like Prop 6, Prop 36.
Awesome. We did an amazing job, Brianna. No questions.
I know everyone knows. Oh, there's one in the chat. Is the anti-justice reform gaining steam?
Let me see, how do I say it? I'm not, I won't say it like if I know as a factual thing. But I will say, something we say when we're pushing legislation, through the legislative process. If we're not out there communicating and talking to our community members, you best believe they are. And a lot of them come from big pockets. One thing I've come to realize, um, since I've been home is, as I mentioned earlier, the power in numbers, right? Near here, near my city council district, uh, I've watched, grassroots person, Eunice Hernandez take down Gil Cedillo, right? I've seen stuff like that, and it shows that there's power in numbers, but you best believe that other people that want to get back to the tough on crime, um, they're out there. So that's why these conversations are important for us to help educate one another, to bring people into the fold, to be out there talking to our neighbors, of the things that we believe um, in regards to some of these ballot initiatives, and what these ballot initiatives will do to our community members, to our loved ones, things of that nature. So
Thank you.
Efrain, I like this question. So Daniel in the chat said, what would you say to the younger generation who don't care to vote? I'm like trying to think of how I would like nicely word it.
no, that's a tough one. Something that I used to do while I was incarcerated is we used to tell ourselves, what would you tell a 15-year-old you? Um, that's a great question. Was that Daniel? I would say, I think just like I said earlier, the proof is in the pudding. Having some facts of what we can do when we come together, of why these votes are important. I know I can't remember what it was. I think it was a local election recently where literally someone won by one vote. They won by one vote. And I can't remember off the top of my head, so I apologize for that. But there was an instance where that happened, and the one vote changed that whole race of those two people or whatever it was. But it was like a local election or something like that. But there's power numbers, like I said, Prop 57, that voter turnout that we had there in 2020, um, showed the importance, how much that significantly impacted our community, and really we watched our community rise up to vote. And another thing I will add, I wish I would have known this before, but it's like these propositions, these ballot initiatives, these bills, right? Well, the work that we do in legislation, pushing these bills, opposing bad bills, they're going to affect us for a younger person. I know myself when I was young, I didn't understand the actions to the choices I was making, right? I didn't understand what a gun enhancement was and how that became to be, right? These were things that were voted on through legislation. So if we understand that as a young person, we understand that we can change that, because again, this is all going to affect, the younger generation. It's going to affect, my kids, you know, our grandkids, the future, right? And in our communities, I'll say most importantly, our communities, because we know a lot of this tough on crime stuff is this system is built to put us in jail, to put our communities in jail. And so it's going to have that effect. So I would say that's why voting is important.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I definitely would like say the same thing, just come at them with like a lot of hard facts about like the impact of things, and also too like how one vote can really change it. And also too just like emphasizing like the impact of how it could have like on their community too. I also feel like the people who like younger generations maybe I'm speaking on like that for like the part of like when they don't care. I feel like those are the people who tend to like complain more about politics too. So I think I would also emphasize like, well, you can have a say in this, and like maybe like you won't complain as much about it either. I think it's just like really important to just like have your voice be heard and everything in the like voting process. And like Ephraim said, like there's strength in numbers, and I think that's super important. So we all just need to be like a collective effort in that. I think I would just emphasize that and try to like relate it to something that's like relatable for them, because I think it's just like a matter of them being like super informed and them just like knowing what their vote can do. So I think that's what I would say. Yeah, Sherry.
Well, I have a lot of grandchildren. They're not very political. It's frustrating to me, but then I have to remember I was not very political either when I was young. I actually saw Martin Luther King when I lived in South Carolina. Didn't know it, was kind of annoyed that the parking lot was getting full and I couldn't get to the laundromat. So I understand that point of view from a young person. But the other thing is, I don't push it on them, but when they start complaining about the price of this or not getting to do this or something about the government, I immediately just say, "Did you vote?" And I know they didn't. So they go, "No." And I said, "Then shut up. You had your chance to say something. Now's not it. You can't fix anything by whining about it at my house." So I try a little reverse psychology and hopefully someday it'll sink into all of them. I don't know. But it is a difficult thing because there's an apathy. There are some children, and like my girlfriend's kids have just turned 18 and they're so excited to vote. That's wonderful. And it's something new since you can vote a little earlier now. So maybe that's helping, and maybe the schools are helping a little bit, but the majority of the kids just don't see how it affects them like everything else, like taxes and social security and all of that stuff. They don't have any reference point for it. So all you can do is try and just reiterate every time they complain about something, you had a chance, you have a chance, do something about it. Don't sit there and whine, won't fix it. So that's my old lady advice.
Thank you, Sherry. And it's not old lady advice, because I think that's kind of what I was trying to say too. Like do some reverse psychology on them, and like they have no right to complain if they didn't vote, you know, then they can't really say much, because I'll just tell them to go vote. So I appreciate you uplifting that. I also will say too, I think there's I think you kind of mentioned too that you have people turning 18 and they're excited to vote. I know that there is like a higher turnout than usual for Gen Z and millennials. So I think that is something that we can like have hope in. But yeah, it's difficult. So I think it's all about just like making sure that they educate themselves and like we educate them. So that's why we have these spaces, to make sure that everyone's educated and getting out and voting.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that, Sherry. And I love your approach, and definitely will use it. Uh, because it's true. It's how do you tap into the younger people, and I always remind myself of the young me, right? I know growing up, being involved in gangs and stuff like that, like why would I even care, But in reality, in hindsight, now I share with them, I'm able to. I think what the approach I've done with some of my like my friends' kids that are now, involved in the same street gang where I was involved in, when I see them and talk to them, is really sharing with them, captivating them or bringing them into the conversation with my story and my experience of incarceration and all that I went through, and understanding now and showing them now the work that I do now here with Initiate Justice and just in general as an advocate, um and showing them the importance of that and why that's so important. I think even like our incarcerated community, um really helping them see that their voices are going to be heard, right? Something that we do when we send in those letters of support for bills that we're working on. We get those letters. Now we've gotten more responses from people that are currently incarcerated, because they see that, we remind them those things are read, someone's reading them, our votes are being counted. All of that stuff is just reminding them folks that that's what it is, and I think it's tough, it's not easy, right? But it's doable.
crazy because
Just be
it's
prepared. Just be prepared. You will get eye rolling.
oh yeah. They'll always have something to say. But I'm seeing it's like in the chat that like they're even offering students money to, you know, them to be able to like work at voting centers and stuff. So I think that may help like encourage a vote. And I think anything with money really attracts the younger generations. I mean anyone, but still. So maybe that could also help too. And too, I like how Vita mentioned like teaching the kids how it affects them on a micro level. If they think of things on a macro level and like how it really impacts everyone as a community, like it is even impacting them too. I think you can really hone on how it impacts them and their future. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the important, like Brianna mentioned in the beginning, the important stuff is like in the local level, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, right? The you know, those type of elections are very much important when you look at it in the abolitionist framework, when you talk about what we want our communities to look like. I am actively involved in the neighborhood council here, and I would have never pictured myself being a part of that. If this was a neighborhood council for a community that I once used to terrorize and cause a lot of harm and hurt to now be a part of creating solutions and finding alternatives. It's empowering, to say the least.
That's awesome. And I think it's definitely too you with that like lived experience and like once being that youth in that neighborhood, that gives you, like Sherry said, that's like your second chance gift, you know? So I think that's awesome. Okay, well, I think before we close out tonight, if anyone has any more questions or comments before we close. And just to reiterate, everything will be shared with you, and we're also going to be continuing this conversation. So make sure that you are signed up through that link to join our meetings. I'll also send you a link right now to register an RSVP for our September community meeting. Will we be continuing this conversation and also applying more of like what we got from that poll that we took from you all in the beginning to just make sure that we're really supporting you all for this, providing you all with the tools and information that you need in order to get out and vote this year. So just thank you all for joining us in this conversation tonight and hopefully for future conversations.
Yeah,
It helps to just RSVP now too, so you don't forget.
Yeah, I will say thank you. Seconding that, like, thank you very much for joining us. We hope this was was of some use. You hope you take something out of it and could utilize this. Again, share it out with your community members. If you are part of any listservs, share it out, you know, some of this information with them. And definitely stay tuned in with us as we'll have more. If anything does pop up from here to our next community meeting, definitely feel free to reach out, email Brianna and I. And then after we can also like, because I know this was a lot of information today. So if things pop up and you guys think there'd be some other stuff that we could add that would be also useful or share out with our community members, definitely send it over. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, everyone. I was just responding in the chat too. Can you drop me?
Good night, everybody. See you next month.
Good night. See you. And yes, I'll drop our emails in the chat right now too. And for those who just got here, we will be sharing everything that we went over tonight. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much for joining us too. And you will be getting everything that was covered. And join us next month to get even more information as well.